But I figured the way to do this is just to have the conversation about it and not to presume that anyone has any particular perspective on the topic. But there's a couple of reasons why I chose this article, and as soon as this starts working, I'll tell you why, if it ever starts working. Shanti, can you still hear us?
I can hear you. You should put the computer a little higher so we can see your head. Yeah.
That better? Okay. All right. For some reason, this is
quite a technical genius.
well. Sometimes this is not working. All right. Well, we'll see. Let's see here. I don't know if it's working or not. We'll see here. Okay.
Briefly.
Well, let's hope that it's working. We will find out. Now,
It's on the TV.
it says live. It says live streaming. So we'll see.
It's behind you.
Yeah, I can. What you can see, I can see.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Okay. So no, that's not. And it's not. That's not always the case.
How do you know if it's working or not?
At this point, I will not know if it's.
But
working.
what is your criteria for working?
If it's actually showing up on YouTube or not. Zoom thinks it's sending it to YouTube.
Okay.
This computer, I remember, is not able to manage that. This computer is too schwach is the word in Yiddish, which means weak. This is a pointless and useless computer. So it can't do everything that it needs to do. And I forgot before I set it up that I needed to do that. But whatevs, it'll be what it's gonna be. It's
Okay.
gonna be what it's gonna be.
And is she the only person on Zoom? for the
Shanti is
hundred?
the only person on
100?
Zoom. Yeah, Shanti is the only.
It says live in my computer.
And it looks like this is not gonna work either. As I said, this computer gets very
Well,
overloaded
Mine has a mind of its own. so
very
maybe they're-
quickly.
Maybe they're related.
It gets very overloaded very quickly. And oh my gosh, the whole thing is gonna crash. Okay. All right, everybody, excuse me, I'm so sorry to have to do this, but clearly we need to switch computers because the computer I've got is.
Well, tell me more about
Standard.
Tell me more about her session today. Does she come, Mimi, does she come with a topic? Oh, I don't think she did.
I'm sorry, Sandy and Shanti, we've got some technical issues here on this end, so I'm gonna switch computers.
Free flowing, is it meant to be free
Yeah, it was
flowing?
a little bit free flowing today. We ended up kind of talking about the justice system, and Jack Bernard talked about Philadelphia. He thinks it all needs to be changed there, like getting rid of some of these decriminalizing the
Is Jerry Small come? He said he was coming, Jerry Small.
Yeah, he didn't come.
All
I
right.
don't understand a word he says, whether he has a mask off or not anyway, so I don't care about him. That's not very nice, but
Were you here when Jack's daughter came and talked about?
Jack Bernard.
Yeah, his daughter talked about Anne Frank.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, here we go. Finally. I apologize for the delay, everybody. But we should be able to now see the other people and see the text we're looking at. Can you see it? Is it big enough? Okay. All right, so
I
not,
can't
so
read it. The title I could read.
the title, we'll see about the rest of it. If it needs to be bigger, we'll make it bigger. Can you do it?
That's okay for me.
Connie, can you see it or
I
need to
think
be?
so, if I really concentrate.
All right, that's no good. Let me make this a little bigger. I'm happy to make it bigger.
Oh, that's fine. Oh, that's
There we go.
wonderful.
Okay. All right, so the reason that I picked this article, besides just the fact that it is a topic that's particularly close to my heart, is, and well, maybe one of the reasons it's so close to my heart is that she begins with this anecdote.
Uh-huh.
Nearly 30 years ago, my mother was one of the hundreds of thousands of people who attended the 1992 March for Women's Lives in Washington, D.C. It was a pivotal moment for abortion rights at the Supreme Court, which was about to hear arguments in the case Planned Parenthood v. Casey. Though she left me at home, the words on her sign, "Every child a wanted child," made an impression. So did the fact that the buses to Washington were chartered by our synagogue. When she returned, I wore the neon pink choice hat that she bought to my classroom at Jewish Day School and began to spread the word. Right. So the reason that this is so close, because I, with a group of my friends, was in, this was probably I think was the only time I've actually traveled to Washington for any sort of activism. I'm not much of a marcher, but somehow this was enough. This situation was enough. And it's a little bit, I had kind of forgotten actually that I had gone on this march. So being reminded of it was kind of interesting.
So we traveled to Soviet Jewelry
Yes,
overnight.
right.
So right next to Vice President Gore.
Oh, wow.
He was totally wonderful.
Yeah.
Friendly, wonderful.
Oh, yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. So, yeah, so I don't remember seeing any famous people, on my trip, but it was pretty inspiring to be in Washington with so many people. And I was not Jewish then, so I didn't really have a particular sense of Jews, not Jews, whatever. I was sort of at the non-religious part of my life, and so I just went down with friends. It was not like I was with a church group or whatever. But I imagine that it was not just Jews, right? It was probably also liberal Christians who were sending people.
No doubt. Yeah.
And to think, right, that in 1992 was only 20 years or so after Roe v. Wade, right? And now we're 30 years past Planned Parenthood v. Casey. And to think that, God forbid, we could go back to the situation that preceded that, or as many people said, it would actually be worse, right? Because even the evangelical, there was not so much evangelical opposition to abortion back in the early 70s. It was primarily on the Catholic side. But evangelicals, even if they were opposed to abortion, made it clear that women's lives were more important, right? And today they don't, right? Today it's all about the baby. Put that in quotation marks. All right, so I'm going to try not to be completely partisan on this issue, but it's a little bit difficult because it's something that's, as I said, it's for whatever reason, this is an issue that's moved me from childhood, really, as soon as I was aware of it. I remember when I was in high school, I went for a summer to Northwestern University for a journalism program. I had this idea that I would want to be a journalist. I had no idea that I'm much too waspy, much too polite to be a journalist. Asking important questions to people is clearly not my style. So I didn't last very long as a journalist, but I remember being there and having a big crush on a girl. And we talked about a whole bunch of stuff. But one of the things we talked about was abortion, and she was from La Jolla, in Orange County, near San Diego. Whoa, was she a Republican on this issue? And I stayed in touch with her for a couple of years. We eventually lost track of each other, but during the early years of college, I think I heard from her at maybe it was actually, no, it must have been, that was still early 80s, so it must not have been already this time, but I remember hearing from her and saying, Jim, you were so right, and I was so wrong on this topic. It's like, thank God, one person at least. So anyway, all right, so any other introductory thoughts before we get to this?
I was given a fruitcake that's much too much for me. So I thought I would share it with the large group of people who were.
Huge group of people who are going to be interested in this topic. Sweeten
If anybody wants.
I'll definitely take a piece.
Yeah,
Very tasty.
It looks wonderful.
The idea of the paper towels was because of
that's
the,
nice.
That looks
Very
lovely.
fine quality out there.
Yes.
because of the
Oh,
Finest.
that's lovely.
Finest quality biscuits.
Thank you. Barbara, thank you. Very necessary. Thank you, Arthur. Yeah,
Welcome.
thank you, Arthur. That's very nice of you.
Thank you for helping me appreciate it.
I'm also just interested in hearing from you about, because you were obviously you came of age in a pre-Roe v. Wade environment. And so what was that like?
When I was married in 1948, and I wanted to get birth control, you couldn't talk on the telephone to the gynecologist.
Right.
Had to make an appointment, go see him or her secretly and not sharing any information.
Wow.
And he was very guarded. And the whole appointment was very guarded, and his secretary was
Right.
looking around in case anybody came in uninvited. And
Well, I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this issue, is because I feel like it's much more about women's rights and about the control of women than it is about the
excuse me,
fate of the fetus. And so I think that that contraception and abortion
yeah,
they go together.
yeah,
And when there's better access to contraception, there's much less call
for
for
abortion.
abortion. And Barbara, do you have any particular memories?
Excuse me?
Do you have any memories of that time? Are
Much
you willing to
younger.
share?
She's much younger.
I know she's younger.
No, except I was very interested in it and certainly agreed with it.
Yeah. I mean, when you were growing up, was there talk about the possibility of pregnancy and abortion, or was it just not mentioned at all until God forbid it happened?
No, it wasn't mentioned.
That's what I thought.
My mother was kind of, I think, anti-political,
Mhm.
and my father, my whole family except me were convinced Republicans. So,
Right. Although Republicans back then,
oh, yeah.
it was, I mean, George Bush, the first George Bush was pro-choice until he wasn't, right?
Yeah.
Until,
It was very different.
right, he had to flip-flop, yeah. Goldwater was a staunch pro-choice, so, Yeah, this topic doesn't always match.
Right.
you
One of
know.
the things that doesn't match is that unlike progress that's being made in so many other areas of social behavior, this is seems to be going the other way
Yeah,
with people becoming more,
Well, now the Republicans are using it to stir up their base. I mean, it's a political tool.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, playing with our lives.
that's the problem. There's all these things.
That disgusting Amy Coney Barrett, she's really off my list. Because one of the comments she made fairly recently was, well, they don't need to have an abortion, they can just put them up for adoption. And I thought of all the cold-hearted, nasty things. I haven't seen her rushing out to adopt a
She has
child.
two adopted children.
Pardon?
She has two adopted children.
Oh, well, still.
So she has what
Credibility.
she feels is sort of the moral standing, right, to say that, look, people like me adopt children.
Yeah.
And,
That doesn't wash with me.
But
You ever watch Call the Midwife on Masterpiece Theater?
no, but my mother is obsessed with it.
It's wonderful.
It's a wonderful show.
It's
Yeah.
a wonderful show, and it does, and of course, abortion is illegal during that time.
Right.
But it portrays examples of abortion when
Right.
it's illegal, and it's very worthwhile watching.
But yeah, I agree with you, Arthur, that this is, but I also think, because Connie was bringing up contraception, and I feel like there's also this sort of move on the part of a right-wing, I wouldn't even say Republican, but a
yeah.
right-wing
Yeah.
movement, right, that to really reverse all of these things.
Mhm.
Um,
Well,
And-
they don't like women any too much either,
mm-mm.
I don't believe.
No, I think there's the little kid that is the one that sits in a wheelchair. He went and talked about how women are clay vessels,
Hmm.
I didn't know if you knew this, but you're just vessels for baby. That's all.
Who are you talking about? What are you talking about?
His name is Cawthorn. He's a very young man who became, is a representative and
Oh.
when he got up on the floor, well, he didn't get up, he
Yeah.
sits in the wheelchair,
Yeah.
he's disabled. But he used this Christian imagery, right, of the clay vessels, and so it really is, that women are not actually full human beings, they are just
Vessels.
repositories for, and that's part of the issue with the whole, I know many parents of adopted children, they wouldn't give up those children.
Of course
And at
not.
the same time, it is such a hard road. It is, those kids have, even in the context of loving adopted parents, it's so difficult. So it just seems to me like it's not a simple thing to say, oh, just give birth. And
I had relatives who, some years ago now, maybe, oh, gosh, 40 or 50. They lived in New York. They wanted to adopt children. And it took them forever. All the stuff they had to go through, I think. I don't know what the ins and outs were.
Right.
They went,
my sister adopted her child.
yeah.
It's very, very complicated.
And my friend Debbie, whose book
Yeah,
about the dogs, her 3 children are adopted. It also, it goes with that subconscious feeling of inability.
Right.
To have a birth. Because she went through terrible
oh,
pregnancies.
she actually went through
She
pregnancy.
went through pregnancies.
Oh, I'm so
and,
sorry to hear it.
And the difficulty also, that so 2 out of the 3 have learning disabilities.
Oh,
And that's complicates.
oh,
their own
absolutely.
feelings
No, as a
about-
father of a kid with a severe learning disability, it's a
Complicated.
challenge. Oh, it's a challenge. And again, no way in which you would, say, oh, these kids don't deserve whatever, blah, blah, blah. But it's just, it's not a simple
No.
It's not a simple, oh, just have the baby, pregnancy is a big deal. So anyway. All right, so this anecdote is not unique in the Jewish American experience. For many Jews, abortion rights are an ethical value passed on from parent to child with community support. The latest Pew Religious Landscape study from 2014 found that 83% of Jews surveyed supported legal abortion in most, or all cases, more than any other religious group surveyed. A firm commitment to abortion rights isn't just one of the socially liberal stances that progressive American Jews take. It's also a belief rooted in our sacred texts, which, despite differing interpretations across time and denominations, consistently prioritize the ultimate well-being of the pregnant person over that of the fetus. That's why, as the right to an abortion stands on another legal precipice, thanks to laws in Texas and Mississippi being heard before the Supreme Court, so many Jewish feminists are furious and ready for a fight.
Does that mean they're gonna kick people?
Yeah, no, it's just one of the only online shopping sites I look at is this shoe store. And so whenever all of the ads online for me are from this shoe store, which I don't mind because I like the shoes. I mean, you can tell that's the same guy that makes this one. But yeah, I really like these here.
I was gonna say that.
Don't know that I can completely pull those off, but they're pretty awesome. All right, today, when we think about faith and reproductive rights, it's easy to begin with the idea that religious groups oppose abortion. The modern anti-abortion movement, after all, arose as a coalition between conservative evangelicals and conservative Catholics, which is really interesting, right? Because before this, as I mentioned before, right, conservative evangelicals, by and large, were indifferent to abortion. It was not their issue, and it was really only, in the wake of the sort of, it was as Barbara said, right? It was a convenient issue on which to organize revivals. Right? Think about the babies. But the Jewish stance is more complex, with roots in the book of Exodus, where feticide is not treated as murder. And I'd like, actually, with your permission, we'll look at that and we'll see what she's talking about. The Talmud, where much of Jewish law is interpreted and where practice is hashed out, defines life as beginning when the baby's head emerges from the mother's body, right? Which is very interesting, right? Because there's another article that I didn't bring because it was making me too upset, from a woman who was on the pro-life side, right? And she says, "Look, face it, life begins at conception."
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And if that is true, right, then okay, I get it, right? But there are other traditional ways of looking at that, right? Yeah. Which is not to say, I do think that this article may be a little bit, I'm not sure that she's on completely solid ground by if what she's going to say is that, and therefore there's no Jewish trouble, right, with a late stage abortion. I think there actually is a problem with that, but that's neither here nor there.
But I could see from their point of view, if without thinking about anything else.
Right.
It's so, in my head, miraculous.
Right.
It's a miraculous happening.
You mean conception?
Conception.
Right.
Yes.
Right. I mean, the only thing, I agree with you.
But
I would also say, right, that
I don't stay there.
But I would also say that that's just the sort of, shall we say, the first miracle.
Yeah.
Right. As Debbie, this is your cousin or your friend?
My friend.
Your friend. As she knows very well, having endured multiple pregnancies that ended in miscarriage, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't take just, it's not like, oh, conception, boom, we're done, great, baby, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's just not, that's not real life. And
Right.
so the number of miracles that is required is
Yeah.
pretty stupendous. right? And so anyway, so even in the once male-dominated rabbinate, and I would say
Yeah,
when we're talking about orthodoxy, of course, it's still completely male-dominated. In the liberal movements, much less so.
yeah.
The question of whose life takes precedence is clear. And I do think that this is really crucial. The principle in Jewish law is tsa'ar gufa kadim, which is to say that her welfare, right, the pregnant woman's welfare, is primary. It's kadim, right? Kadim means it comes first.
Mhm.
Right? So the life of the body, gufa, the life of her body,
Yeah,
right, is primary. And this is 1983. There's Rabbi David Feldman, referring to the pregnant person. Of course, now we're bringing up here, she keeps on using this word pregnant person,
yeah,
right? This is in the context, right, of a world where we have trans men
yeah,
who can still have babies and often can still nurse babies, right? So that's why that's why she's using this language of pregnant person rather than pregnant women.
1983, yeah,
No, but 1983, it's all her and she for Feldman. I'm talking about Stacy Seltzer here.
oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So in 83, right? So this is nothing new, right?
Yeah.
And the texts that Rabbi Feldman is working with, right, are certainly not new texts, right?
Well, doesn't the welfare of the mother go way back?
All the way back,
Yes.
right, to the Talmud.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So her welfare is primary. In Jewish tradition, oh, wait a second. The fetus is unknown, future, potential, part of the secrets of God. And this is, I mean, I had forgotten about this, but that's actually a beautiful way of putting what I was just saying, right? That you don't have conception and then there's a baby, right? That there's so much potential and so much potential for trouble.
So I gave you this anecdote, I don't think it has anything to do with this, but all during the time that Rachel was sick, every time I went to Stop and Shop on Friday, I asked Orthodox women who were very apparent from
Right.
Shabbat. And then I once approached an obvious Orthodox man with a thick beard and tzitzis, and I asked him the same thing. And I gave him the two names, Yirmiyahu and Shoshana, Jeremy and Kathy, and he said, "Don't give me the father's name."
Right.
I told him, "Don't give me the father's name." And I was very offended. Because we know who the mother is, but we're never sure who the father is.
Oh, that's not actually why, though, in this case.
No, why?
In the case of a Misha Berach,
Yes,
right? In the case of a Misha Berach,
that means a good,
a Misha Berach is a prayer for a sick person,
Oh.
someone who is in need of healing. The reason that we say, I mean, I don't say that you can't use the father's name, which obviously he's more strict than I am. But the reason is not because we know where the person came from. It's because of the connection between rachamim, which is the word for compassion, and rechem, right, which is the word for womb. And so the source of compassion is considered to be connected to the person's mother. And so that's as far as I understand,
but
right?
that was not his purpose in saying that. He says, because we don't know. who
Is
the
that what he
father
said?
is.
He said
He
it.
said, we know, we're sure who the mother is.
He actually said
He
that?
said, but
Oy.
we're never sure who the father is,
Oh, go.
which was so
No,
offensive.
that's
And I said,
terrible.
that's my son you're talking
Well, and
about.
not only that, that's completely irrelevant to the question.
I know.
Right, I mean,
It
so,
has nothing to do with this either.
no, I
But I
mean,
had to bring it up.
and, right, and, I mean, if you want to say the father's name, fine, but the point is that traditionally we talk about the mother, right,
of the
because
compassion.
it's connected to the
I
womb.
had never even
Right,
didn't know that.
and so,
If he had-
and
If he had taught me that, I would have been less offended.
right, and so, and I'm gonna say, Bog s nim, as we say in Russian, God be with him, but I'm going to assume that he was just laying it on thick, but that he also understands that the reason we say the mother's name is because the womb is considered the source of compassion. And that's, so it's the, to put it a little maybe more bluntly than necessary, it's the feminine aspect of God that we call out,
Oh,
right? When we're saying Amisha Bera, we want that what is stereotypically feminine, right? The nurturing and the compassionate, and, not again, that men can't be those things, obviously, God willing, we can, right? But just that we associate that with female. Okay. But anyway, so the mother is known, right? The mother is present. The mother is alive, and she is asking for compassion, right? In this case, and I think this is one of the most important aspects is that the anti-abortion movement talks about abortion as though it were a way for people to make money,
Right.
right? They talk about it as though it's a scam.
Has nothing
Right.
to do with compassion. That's
Right.
nowhere. in there.
Exactly. Where these women go looking for compassion, and they find it, right, from people who take care of them, right, in abortion clinics and in other places, right, and they're actually getting the compassion that they need, right, and it's so anti-abortion people to sort of just elide that entirely, right, that the only entity that requires compassion, right, is potential life,
yes.
right,
Well,
and which
that's
is
that same old trick they have of just simplifying everything.
Right.
They don't take any grays into consideration.
Right.
It's just black and white.
Right.
This way or that way, my way or the highway is
Right.
what they're saying.
So her welfare is primary, right? So in Jewish tradition, the pregnant person's needs are central to the moral equation, which again, she makes it sound a little bit like these Jewish texts sort of support what the anti-abortion people would call abortion on demand. I'm not quite sure that's the case, but right, that the living, breathing person in front of you, right, is a reality, right? That it's a living, breathing person with a soul. It's not a clay vessel just holding the fetus. So true Orthodox Jews and Orthodox Jewish organizations are far more likely to take a political stand against abortion compared to conservative reform and reconstruction, right? Which is true. But in recent years, as when New York State liberalized its abortion laws, Orthodox Jews were divided as much on gender as on politics on the question. Interviewed by JTA, some Orthodox Jewish women expressed that they wanted the right to discuss the need for abortion with their rabbi and doctor, not with their political representatives. And which, again, this is a person looking for Rahmanis, right? A person who's pregnant, a pregnant woman who's in a position of wondering about what to do when she's pregnant in a way that she doesn't want to be, right? The primary thing she's looking for is Rahmanis.
And it's from a rabbi.
And of course, Betach, right? If you can't go to your rabbi,
Yeah, right.
for compassion, and yes, there are going to be conservative rabbis. There's going to be Orthodox rabbis who will say the law is this and you can't do it, and the woman will, and the woman will do it or not do it, whatever. But and then he'll offer compassion, right? But the point is that this is a situation of that's a very emotional, right, and a spiritual crisis. It's not a hard and dry, it's not a hard fast sort of like, nope.
So I was asked to donate my brain at MGH.
Before you were dead?
Yes,
Oh.
I had to sign.
Oh, yeah.
So, but my first response was I have to talk to my rabbi first.
Yes,
That was my first
of
response.
course. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a challenging question. So what did you end up deciding?
I spoke to Bill Hamilton.
What did he
And he
say?
said it had to be timely, because I had to be buried the day after.
Yeah.
And what if it was in Florida? And there was that whole business of flying. Not very complicated, but I signed it,
Yeah, no, it's interesting. There was a guy that lived at 100 Center Street. And his son is a congregate of mine up in Cambridge. And he wanted, his goal was to be buried, his goal was to be used as a cadaver
Uh-huh.
in medical school.
Yeah.
And so we had a whole conversation
Yeah.
about it. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's an interesting
I
question.
think that's important.
All right, so, okay. As some Orthodox Jews have aligned themselves with the right on other issues from Israel to immigration, so too have they moved towards the anti-abortion position. Still, even the strictest interpretation leaves room for the life of the mother. As Dr. Emanuel Jacobitz, an Orthodox rabbi, wrote in 1965, right, that's 65, so things, remember in 1965, abortion was illegal,
Yeah.
right? And he was dealing with the reality of widespread illegal abortion,
Yeah.
right? Which is, for me, that's the issue that is most, I mean, there's so many distressing aspects of this, but that's one of the most distressing, right? Is that people will go back, right, to illegal abortion. And women will die rather than have babies, which is so unnecessary. And so, yeah. Anyway, but so just to take that with this grain of salt, right, that he is writing at a time when illegal abortion was a really salient reality, whereas as of yet, it is not yet here, right? We don't have a lot of illegal abortion yet because people can still go
Go to a
elsewhere.
state.
But
If they have the wherewithal.
if they have the
to
will and the money,
somewhere else,
right, and
not
so,
be stuck in Texas
Yeah.
or Mississippi.
Yeah.
and then the other, of course, the other issue now is that we have the pills that take care of abortion. And so those are now, going to be, those will sort of, it's going to be interesting to see how that works out. As defined in the Bible, the rights of the mother and her unborn child are distinctly unequal, since the capital guilt of murder takes effect only if the victim was a born and viable person. Right?
And
So
then killed? Is that what it means? Then the baby.
no, I'm sorry.
What does that mean?
Certainly, I think that, if let's read the rest of the paragraph and then we can discuss it. That, he explains, doesn't mean abortion is never a grave offense, right? It's still killing something that's alive, right? But this inequality then is weighty enough only to warrant the sacrifice of the unborn child.
Yeah.
Is if the pregnancy otherwise poses a threat to the mother's life, right?
So
So
the
he's
mother
not,
comes
he's
first.
not saying, right, this is that, what I was saying before, right? It's not that our texts allow abortion on demand, right? That sort of notion that every time there should be no limits, right? Whatever a woman wants to do up until, like, our tradition would be very hard to make that claim. But, right, that the life of the mother is always going to take precedence over the life of the fetus until the baby is born. And so we can, I think, from that sort of, we don't have to only have it be that, that the woman will die, right? There's other ways in which the life of the mother, we understand enough about trauma, we understand enough about the psychological effects of this, that it's, it's a complicated question. It's not.
But are they only talking about the inequality? What if nothing is happening and it's gonna work? Or we haven't gotten to that yet?
I'm sorry? The inequality, what he's saying is that that the
The life of the mother takes,
takes precedence,
Precedent.
right?
okay.
He's also saying that it doesn't take that much precedence, right? He's saying that if that short of a tangible risk to the mother's life, right? We can't justify abortion. If that makes sense,
that's the Orthodox rabbi.
right?
Okay,
Whereas I think that other rabbis would read the sources slightly differently.
Yeah.
But I think what the reason that she's bringing this source, right, is to underscore, right, that even in the most conservative forms of Judaism, right, that still there's a recognition that the mother is not simply a vessel
no,
and expendable in the service of the fetus. One of the core principles of Judaism is pikuach nefesh, the preservation of life above all else, even Shabbat observance, which is otherwise sacrosanct. What could be more worthy than focusing on the need for the pregnant person, if suffering, to end that suffering, to live and to contribute to the world? Is her life, her soul, present, alive, and asking for compassion, as Rabbi Feldman put it? That is more worth saving, right? So basically, she's trying to say, right, that we need to widen that conception of the weightiness of the inequality, right? That the inequality between the life of the mother and the life of the fetus, right, is more than Rabbi Jacobitz says. It's more like what Rabbi Feldman says, right? That this living person, right, takes precedence over the potential of life. So we are far from the only religion to take a nuanced stance on abortion. But a religious group that dictates a sweeping, intractable view of right and wrong when it comes to abortion may have an easier time getting attention than, for instance, the religious organizations that recently filed an amicus brief to the Supreme Court, asking fervently for careful circumstance-based consideration in the upcoming abortion case out of Mississippi. Like, this is a group of Catholics for choice,
yeah,
right? Who are not people who are just willing, like Rabbi Feldman, right? Like even this person, right? Not wild-eyed, let's have abortion everywhere we go, right? But we need to really take it seriously and not paint it all with one brush. And so a number of Jews are starting to make noise to rectify this imbalance. A new campaign called 73 Forward, led by the National Council of Jewish Women, is gathering activists from secular to Orthodox to defend abortion access from an explicitly Jewish perspective. Rabbis have pledged to join the fight in Texas. Feminist organizing has always attracted Jewish participation. While within our communal world, groups like NCJW, that's the National Council of Jewish Women, and publications like Lilith, which, so I guess this woman used to work
yeah.
at NCJW, and now she works at Lilith, and have carried the abortion rights banner for many years. But what is notable today are the particular ways Jews are organizing as Jews. Gen Z and millennial Jewish leaders also point to the reproductive justice movement led by women of color, which connects abortion to racial, economic, and social inequality as the beacon for their own activism. This holistic framework has inspired Jews to fight for abortion access as a crucial part of repairing the world, tikkun olam, a value that has animated Jewish activism for decades. One could say, centuries, but that's great. Many Jewish feminists say they now feel called to support abortion access for those who need it the most, while reminding the country that our own religious freedom is at stake. And I think that is another issue that often gets lost
Yeah.
in this, right? Is that there are a range of religious views of abortion. It's not religion is anti-abortion and non-religious is pro-choice, right? It's a very mixed bag.
And among Catholics also?
Oh,
They must
absolutely.
Yeah.
obviously the Catholic Church is strongly, anti-abortion, but
But.
but Catholics are all over the place. I mean, and for good reason, because, they or their wives, daughters, sisters, whatever, have, find themselves needing reproductive care, and it's just not simple.
Doesn't this phrase "for those who need it most" qualify, limit, narrow the availability? Why does it have to be, can it be free access to abortion irrespective of someone's value judgment
Well,
or moral judgment or other judgment about need?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're making a very good point, Arthur. I do think that what she means here, I think what she means is that there are many places in the country, like here in Massachusetts, and especially, say, in California, where abortion access is not a question, right? There is access to abortion, and there will be, no matter what happens, at least in the short term, in the Supreme Court, right? Because the Supreme Court is not talking at this point about outlawing abortion. It's just talking about allowing the states to outlaw abortion, right? So I think what she's talking about, when those who need it most, she means those who are living in places where there's a strong likelihood that such access will no longer be available. And so the ones who need it most, like we need activism in Texas, say, much more than we need activism right now in Massachusetts, right? I think that's what she's talking about. I don't think she's making a moral judgment. Go ahead, Shanti, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I believe life begins in conception.
Yeah.
But I also value the mother's health, the abortion
Yes.
can take place.
Yes, no, I think it's very important to recognize that even if you take a non-Jewish view, right, of when life begins, right, that doesn't mean that the mother's life is not important, right? It's quite possible, right, to believe that life begins at conception and still acknowledge, right, that there are two human beings here.
So important to have dissenting opinion.
Yes.
Here. That's a big plus.
Yeah. So say more, Shanti. How do you react to what you've been hearing here?
Yeah, I do believe that Jewish and the Texas mothers have to travel a long way to get an abortion.
Yes.
They are raped on the entry to the Texas border. So when there is a rape or taken advantage of the woman, she has to have a choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
What did she say?
She said that she's worried about, in Texas, that there's no, that women who are raped or who have otherwise been taken advantage of,
Incest,
don't have,
yeah.
necessarily the option, and they have to travel from Texas, and that's, yeah. And I do think, right, that the issue, and this is a very complicated issue, right, because there's, because we all have our own sort of idea of, well, when is it no longer okay to have an abortion? And so the question really is, what does the state decide in regards to that? Right. And it is really interesting because right now, it's sort of like up until 24 weeks. But I was reading somewhere that the very, very few doctors actually perform an abortion after the first trimester. Like, it's very hard to find someone who will do it, right? Because whatever their own sort of sense of it, right, is that they don't feel that it's ethical to do that. And so there is some, I sort of see, right, on one hand, sort of, well, should the state sort of go where so many doctors put their ethical line, or should the state be more flexible to accommodate those doctors and others whose ethical boundaries are in a different place. And it's really, that is really a complicated question. And not taking into account the life of the mother, it just seems to me like it just seems completely immoral, regardless of your view about abortion at other times. Yeah. But yes, I do think, right, that it does become a question of religious freedom, right? And the question really is like where, and that's sort of a pity in a sense that people come at this and put it as a kind of religious versus non-religious.
Yeah, what about civil freedom?
Right, exactly, right, and as though, and the other thing is, right, that many people who are staunchly anti-abortion are staunchly thus until someone in their family needs reproductive care, and then all of a sudden, lo and behold, and this happens all the time, of course, people can be strongly anti-gay, right? They can be anti-transgender until all of a sudden they have a loved one who falls into those categories, and all of a sudden the shades, the scales fall from their eyes, and they're like, oh wait, I get it now. All right. So Jewish leaders aren't on television each weekend screaming, get your laws off our religion. But as a minority religion, we naturally favor a true separation of church and state. And there's another reason. When I write about Jewish attitudes toward contraception or abortion, I always receive an onslaught of vitriol in my inbox. It starts with a horrifying comparison between abortion and the Holocaust that equates millions of thinking, feeling Jewish lives cut down in their prime to embryos, and extends to the idea that 83% of American Jews in support of abortion rights are perpetuating the very mass murder that devastated my
Oh,
grandparents'
you could
generation.
throw up.
That's disgusting.
Yeah, and people do it without even a thought. Right?
That's really
It's
disgusting.
stupid also.
It's
a way of thinking
right.
that is,
Well, I mean, these are the same.
Obscurantism.
This is the same mindset that says, making you wear a mask is like making you wear a yellow star. I mean, it's an appeal to, emotional.
It's an appeal to the lowest in us,
Right.
the very lowest.
And it's so. In my mind, it just demeans the person who's making the comparison. It reflects how sort of callous and naive in some ways they are.
and uneducated about the subject.
Right. They don't really know anything about the Shoah, is I think, is the point. Harassment facing Jews who support abortion often goes back to one of the oldest lies in anti-Semitic history, the lie that Jewish people ritually sacrifice children. Trope, known as blood libel, has historically posed mortal danger to members of our community. In 1990, an article by my colleague Susan Weidman Schneider at Lilith detailed a disturbing trend: the increasing use of anti-Semitism in flyers distributed by people harassing abortion clinics. The piece noted how intrinsic the trope of the Jewish abortion doctor profiting off innocent blood was to the zealous anti-choice movement of that era. It was a sadly prescient observation. In 1998, Dr. Barnett Slepian was murdered, and I remember this, after returning home from synagogue, where he was praying for his dead father. In a world where many hate us for who we are, it may be daunting for Jews to speak out rather than blending. But regardless of potential backlash, this moment is perilous for religious and bodily freedom, and it calls for courage. There's a loud group of people using faith as a weapon. We can't stand by and let that happen, says NCJW CEO Sheila Katz, whom I've heard that this Sheila Katz is quite
Yeah.
Quite the person. I'm not really familiar with her yet, but I want to sort of learn more about her because I've heard from various sources that she's quite powerful. She's right. As my mom's old protest sign reminds us, reproductive rights, including abortion, give us the chance to create families and individual futures that are wanted, cherished, and loved. What value is more Jewish than that? So that
Great
is-
article, very thoughtful.
yeah, very thoughtful. So I wanted to look,
So there's a conservative movement that has a body, a specific body of rabbis. You
yes,
know,
it's called the
judges.
Committee of Jewish Law and Standards.
Do they have a specific stand?
Well, it sounds like they do, and that's what I was just gonna look at here.
God bless you.
Bless you.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Right here. So it's called a tshuva, which
Yeah.
means so that she'elot, it's a she'elot and questions and answers.
Yeah.
Right. So this paper was adopted as a majority opinion by a
With
vote
the
of 16-0.
Robert Gordis, Ben Sion Bloxa. That's got everybody there.
Right. And note here, this is in 1983,
Yeah,
right? This is before women were
Rabbis,
rabbis
yeah.
in the conservative movement. All right, so we're not going to get into this right now, but
what's the last line? No, that's what I read, the last paragraph.
I think we got it from her.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Jim, that article is why, the representative of why I tell my kids that if I were religiously inclined, I would convert to Judaism.
Right.
Because this is what I most respect about Judaism, is this always keeping up to date, looking forward, adapting to life the way it is, and
Right.
still holding on to the.
Yeah, I agree.
Jewish values.
Conservative Judaism.
Well, conservative and reform to be sure.
Yes.
Right, but
Conservative-
even orthodoxy does do that. It just that it does it a lot more slowly,
Yeah,
and it really struggles sometimes because, and where it falls on abortion is a little bit, I'm not so well versed on it, but say with the most obvious one is gay rights, right? Is that there's a real conflict, right, in Jewish practice between the verse in Leviticus that clearly maybe a too quick of a reading, but according to most people, it's very clearly outlaws homosexual behavior, right? Yet there are all these other ways of looking at people, right? That it's not so simple, right? Just to sort of deny that they're people.
and also there's commentary on the Bible.
100%, and those commentaries always change, right?
That's right.
Right, and I think part of the issue with homosexuality is at least that for so long it was so clearly against the rules, right? That no one ever really paid attention to it, right? So people had their sex lives
Underneath.
under
Yeah.
under the radar.
Yeah.
And it's only somewhat recently where we've sort of expanded the sort of notion of human rights to include, well, this has to be acknowledged and talked about,
I should have been more clear. I would not convert to the Orthodox or the conservative. It'll probably be a place like TBC.
Right, exactly.
And then also the Orthodox goes from here to here.
Right, the Orthodox are all over the place, right? The Jewish world is so complicated.
Yeah.
And loose. in a
Right,
way.
and so I wanted to look here where the business of feticide. Exodus says more about interesting, this is from 1990. Interesting, we'll have to look at that later. I can't see it now. Let's see where Exodus, what they have here. Right. All right, yeah, so this is from Ishmael team. Right, okay, so right, when a woman is, when a miscarriage is induced by a fight, right,
Yeah.
it's not considered murder. That's what he's talking about. Right, it's not good, right, but it's not a capital.
Okay,
All right, so we're at 4:01.
thank you, Rabbi.
All right, thank you, Shanti.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Great to see you. And I don't know if Sandy was actually with us or just her name was with us, one or the other. Sandy, it's great that you were with. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And we will, if you're interested in these texts, I'm happy to